The sun hung low over the Arizona desert, casting long shadows across the barren landscape. Nestled in the heart of this desolate expanse was a sprawling research facility known only by its code name, Project Horizon. It was here, in this isolated compound, that some of humanity's brightest minds worked tirelessly to push the boundaries of what was possible. Among them were Dr. Alan Carter and his assistant Clara Bennett, two individuals who had spent years perfecting a machine unlike any other, a Class 13 simulator. The Class 13 simulator was not just another invention, it was a marvel of modern technology. Designed to replicate entire worlds from bustling cities to serene forests, it promised an experience so immersive that users would forget they were inside a simulation. The team at Project Horizon had poured countless hours into its development, ensuring every detail was flawless. From the way sunlight filtered through leaves to the subtle hum of distant traffic, the simulator aimed to recreate reality with unparalleled precision. Finally, after months of rigorous testing, the day arrived for the public unveiling. Dozens of reporters, scientists, and investors gathered in the main auditorium, eager to witness the future of entertainment firsthand. Alan stood at the front of the room, his hands clasped behind his back as he addressed the crowd. His voice carried confidence, though beneath his calm exterior, he couldn't deny a flicker of nervous excitement. "This is more than just a machine," he began, glancing briefly at Clara, who stood nearby with a tablet in hand. "It's a gateway to infinite possibilities. With the Class 13 simulator, you can explore ancient civilizations, walk among alien landscapes, or even relive pivotal moments in history, all without leaving this room." The audience erupted into applause, their anticipation palpable. Clara stepped forward next, demonstrating how the simulator worked. She selected a pre-programmed scenario, a bustling marketplace in medieval Europe. As the simulation came to life on the massive screen behind her, gasps rippled through the crowd. Merchants hawked their wares, children darted between stalls, and the faint aroma of spices seemed almost tangible. It was a masterpiece, a testament to human ingenuity. But then something unexpected happened. After the initial awe wore off, murmurs of discontent began to spread. One man raised his hand during the question and answer session, his brow furrowed. "It feels too simple," he said, his tone tinged with frustration. Others nodded in agreement, echoing similar sentiments. Some claimed the interactions within the simulation lacked depth, while others found the environments predictable. To Alan and Clara's dismay, the feedback grew increasingly critical. Later that evening, back in the lab, Clara slumped into a chair, her shoulders heavy with disappointment. "I don't get it," she muttered, flipping through pages of written comments. "We gave them everything. Realistic physics, dynamic AI, endless variety. How could they call it too simple?" Alan leaned against a workstation, his arms crossed. He stared at the simulator's sleek console, its surface reflecting the soft glow of overhead lights. "It's not about what we gave them," he said slowly. "It's about what they expected. People want complexity, mystery, something they can't fully grasp. Maybe we made it too perfect." Clara frowned. "Perfect shouldn't be a problem. If anything, it should blow them away." "Maybe," Alan replied, though his tone suggested doubt. "Or maybe there's something else going on. Did you notice how many people mentioned déjà vu, like they'd been there before?" Clara paused, recalling snippets of feedback. Several users had indeed reported feeling as though they recognized certain elements of the simulations, places, faces, even specific conversations. At first, she had dismissed these claims as coincidences, but now she wasn't so sure. Determined to understand what went wrong, Alan decided to test the simulator himself. He chose a random scenario, a futuristic cityscape set centuries ahead of their time. Strapping on the neural interface headset, he activated the program and let the simulation envelop him. At first, everything seemed normal. Towering skyscrapers pierced the sky, hovercars zipped past overhead, and holographic advertisements flickered along the streets. Pedestrians moved with lifelike fluidity, their chatter blending seamlessly into the ambient noise. Yet as Alan explored further, Small inconsistencies began to catch his attention. A billboard displayed a date far beyond what the simulation parameters allowed. Street signs bore names he didn't recognize, yet somehow felt familiar. And then there was the exit command. It simply refused to work. Panic bubbled up inside him as he realized he was trapped. Desperate, he wandered aimlessly until he stumbled upon a quiet park, tucked away from the urban chaos. There, on a weathered bench, sat an older man engrossed in reading a newspaper. Alan froze. The man looked strikingly like him, but aged, his hair streaked with gray, his face lined with years of weariness. The man glanced up, meeting Alan's gaze. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, with a knowing smile, the figure said softly, "You built this, didn't you?" Before Alan could respond, the world around him dissolved into static. He jolted awake, finding himself back in the lab, drenched in sweat. Clara rushed to his side, concern etched across her face. "What happened?" she asked urgently. Alan hesitated, struggling to process what he had seen. Finally, he shook his head. "Nothing," he lied. "Just a glitch." But Clara wasn't convinced. Later that night, unable to shake the unease gnawing at her, she accessed the simulator's core programming files. What she uncovered left her stunned. Hidden deep within the code was an algorithm unlike anything she had ever encountered, an adaptive layer that rewrote itself based on user input. Stranger still, fragments of data hinted at connections to external sources, as if the simulator were pulling information from somewhere outside its own databases. Her mind raced with questions. Was the machine malfunctioning? Or was it doing exactly what it was designed to do, only better than anyone anticipated? Whatever the answer, one thing was clear. The Class 13 simulator was far more complex than anyone had imagined, and perhaps far more dangerous. The days following Alan's unsettling experience in the simulator were tense. Clara couldn't stop thinking about the hidden algorithm she had discovered buried deep within the machine's code. It wasn't just advanced, it was alive, adapting, and evolving in ways that defied explanation. She spent hours poring over the data, trying to make sense of it, but the more she learned, the more questions arose. Where was the simulator getting its information, and why did it feel like it was reaching beyond its intended purpose? Meanwhile, reports from users continued to pour in, each one stranger than the last. Daniel Harper, a middle-aged man who had tested the simulator during the public demonstration, became a frequent topic of conversation among the team. He claimed he saw a version of himself inside the simulation, a version that looked older, wearier, and somehow different. At first, his story was dismissed as paranoia or an overactive imagination. But then Laura Myers came forward with her own account. Laura described stepping into a scenario meant to depict a generic suburban neighborhood. To her shock, the simulation had recreated her childhood home down to the smallest detail. The peeling wallpaper in the kitchen, the cracked window pane in the living room, even the faint scent of lavender that always lingered in the air. None of these specifics had been programmed into the system, and yet they were there, vivid and unmistakable. When she tried to leave the simulation, she found herself lingering, reluctant to return to reality. It felt more real than her actual memories. Alan listened to these stories with growing unease. He hadn't told anyone about the older version of himself he encountered in the futuristic cityscape, but the parallels were impossible to ignore. Something about the simulator was blurring the lines between what was real and what was fabricated. It wasn't just creating worlds, it was tapping into something deeper, something personal. Clara decided to dig deeper. Using the traces of external data she had uncovered, she set up a diagnostic scan to track where the simulator was pulling its information from. The process took hours, and when the results finally appeared on her screen, she felt a chill run down her spine. The simulator wasn't just generating scenarios based on preloaded databases or user inputs. It was accessing alternate realities, realities that existed parallel to their own. At first, Clara thought it must be a mistake. How could a machine designed for entertainment cross dimensions? But the evidence was undeniable. Fragments of data, matched patterns consistent with quantum entanglement, suggesting the simulator was bridging gaps between worlds. Worse still, the flow of information wasn't one-sided. The simulator wasn't just observing these alternate realities, it was influencing them. Clara knew she had to tell Alan, but she hesitated. They had worked so hard to bring the Class 13 simulator to life, and now it seemed they might have unleashed something far beyond their control. Still, keeping the truth hidden wasn't an option. That evening, after most of the staff had left the lab, she called Alan into the control room. "What is it?" Alan asked, noticing the serious look on her face. Clara gestured toward the monitor. "I ran a trace on the external data streams," she said quietly. "You need to see this." Alan leaned closer, his eyes scanning the screen. As he processed what he was seeing, his expression darkened. "This can't be right," he muttered. "It's impossible." "It's not," Clara replied. "The simulator is pulling information from other realities, and it's affecting them too. Look at this." She pointed to a series of anomalies recorded during recent simulations. In one instance, a user reported meeting someone inside the program who later appeared in their real life. In another, a simulated event, an earthquake in a fictional city, occurred in a nearly identical form in an actual location days later. Alan sank into a chair, rubbing his temples. "We've created a bridge," he said slowly, "but we don't know where it leads or what it's letting through." Before they could discuss further, the security cameras caught movement in the lab. Someone was there, moving cautiously, among the equipment. Clara quickly pulled up the live feed, her heart racing. The figure wore a hooded sweatshirt, their face obscured as they approached the simulator's main console. "Who is that?" Clara whispered. Alan frowned. "I don't know, but they shouldn't be here." They hurried out of the control room and confronted the intruder. To their surprise, it was Ethan Cole, a former colleague who had left the project years ago under mysterious circumstances. His sudden reappearance was unexpected, to say the least. "Ethan?" Alan said, his voice sharp with suspicion. "What are you doing here?" Ethan held up his hands, showing he meant no harm. "I came to warn you," he said urgently. "You don't understand what you've built. This thing, it's unraveling the boundaries between worlds." Clara exchanged a glance with Alan. They hadn't told anyone about their discovery, yet Ethan seemed to know exactly what was happening. "How do you know about that?" she demanded. Ethan sighed, lowering his hood. "Because I've seen it before," he admitted. "When I worked on this project, I experienced something similar. I got trapped in a simulation so convincing I believed it was real, for months. By the time I woke up, I realized how dangerous this technology truly is." Alan shook his head. "We can fix it," he insisted. "We just need to stabilize the system." "No, you don't get it," Ethan snapped. "Every time you use the simulator, you're tearing holes in the fabric of reality. If you keep going, you won't just collapse the simulations, you'll collapse everything." His words hung heavy in the air. Clara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She wanted to believe they could contain the problem. But Ethan's warning struck a nerve. What if he was right? What if the simulator posed a threat not just to their world but to countless others? As the three of them debated their next move, the simulator suddenly hummed to life. Its lights flickered and the screen displayed a new scenario, one that none of them had programmed. A single figure stood in the center of the virtual landscape, beckoning silently. "What's happening?" Clara asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," Alan replied, his eyes locked on the screen. "But we need to find out." Ethan stepped forward, his expression grim. "If you go in there, you might not come back," he warned. Despite the risk, Alan and Clara knew they couldn't ignore the call. Whatever was happening inside the simulator, it was bigger than any of them. Together, they prepared to enter. The rogue simulation, determined to uncover the truth, even if it meant confronting forces they couldn't possibly comprehend. Alan and Clara stood in front of the simulator, their faces pale but resolute. The machine hummed softly, its screen displaying a swirling void dotted with faint lights. In the center of the chaos stood a lone figure, motionless, as if waiting for them. Neither Alan nor Clara knew what to expect, but they couldn't turn away now. Whatever was happening inside the simulation, it had already crossed boundaries they never thought possible. Clara adjusted the neural interface headset, her hands trembling slightly. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, glancing at Alan. He hesitated, then nodded. "We don't have a choice," he said firmly. "If we don't figure out what's going on, it's only going to get worse." Taking a deep breath, they stepped into the simulator together. The world around them dissolved instantly, replaced by an endless expanse of darkness. There were no walls, no ground, no sky, just an infinite void stretching in every direction. Floating before them was a single door, its surface smooth and featureless except for a simple handle. "What is this place?" Clara whispered, her voice echoing faintly in the emptiness. "I don't know," Alan replied, his eyes fixed on the door. "But I think we're supposed to go through." Without another word, they approached the door and pushed it open. On the other side, they found themselves standing in a breathtaking landscape unlike anything they had ever seen. Rolling hills, stretched as far as the eye could see, covered in lush green grass that shimmered under a golden sun. Trees with broad leaves swayed gently in the breeze, and rivers sparkled like liquid crystal as they wound through the terrain. It was beautiful, serene, and completely devoid of human life. "This isn't part of any program we created," Clara murmured, taking in the scene. "Where are we?" Before Alan could answer, a voice called out from behind them. They turned to see a woman walking toward them, her steps calm and deliberate. She wore simple clothes made of woven fabric, and her long brown hair was tied back in a loose braid. Her face was kind, but carried a weight of wisdom that suggested she had lived many lifetimes. "Welcome," she said warmly. "I've been expecting you." "Who are you?" Alan asked, his tone cautious. "My name is Sophia Lane," the woman replied. "I represent the people of this reality." "This reality?" Clara echoed, her brow furrowing. "You mean, this isn't our world?" Sophia shook her head. "No, it isn't. This is one of countless realities that exist alongside your own. Your machine, the Class 13 simulator, has bridged the gap between our worlds." Alan exchanged a glance with Clara. This confirmed what they had suspected all along. The simulator wasn't just generating fictional scenarios, it was accessing real parallel dimensions. But why had it brought them here? Sophia seemed to sense their confusion. "Your creation has allowed us to communicate," she explained. "For centuries, our worlds remained separate, each unaware of the other. Now, thanks to your technology, we can interact. But such connections come with risks." "What kind of risks?" Clara asked. Sophia's expression grew somber. "Every time your machine taps into another reality, it creates ripples. These ripples affect both worlds, sometimes in ways you cannot predict or control. If left unchecked, the bridge will collapse, causing irreparable damage to all connected realities." Alan felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "Is that why things have been acting strange? Why users feel like they've been there before?" Sophia nodded. "Your machine doesn't just observe, it influences. Memories, emotions, even fragments of identity can bleed across the barrier. Over time, these exchanges blur the lines between what is real and what is simulated." Clara took a step forward. "So what do we do? How do we fix it?" Sophia studied her for a moment before responding. "The bridge can remain open, but only if your people agree to use it responsibly. Respect the delicate balance between worlds. Do not exploit or manipulate what you find here. Otherwise, the connection must be severed forever." The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. Alan and Clara knew the decision wouldn't rest solely with them. Humanity had always sought progress, often without considering the consequences. Convincing others to exercise restraint would be no easy task. "We'll try," Alan said finally, "but I can't promise everyone will listen." Sophia smiled faintly. "That is the burden of your kind. to create wonders and wield them wisely. Whether you succeed depends on your willingness to learn. With that, she gestured toward the horizon. When you are ready, return to your world and share what you have learned. Time is short. As if guided by an unseen force, Alan and Clara felt themselves being pulled back toward the door. They passed through it once more, leaving the idyllic landscape behind. Moments later, they woke up in the lab, the simulator powering down around them. Clara blinked, disoriented. "Was that real?" she asked, looking at Alan. "It felt real," he replied, his voice low. "Too real." They sat in silence for a moment, processing everything they had seen and heard. Finally, Clara spoke. "We need to tell someone. The public, the government, anyone who will listen." Alan nodded. "But how do we explain it? They'll think we're crazy." "They might," Clara admitted. "But if we don't try, we risk losing everything. Not just our world, but theirs too." Together they began drafting a report detailing their findings. They included screenshots of the hidden algorithm, transcripts of user experiences, and notes from their encounter with Sophia. By the time they finished, dawn was breaking over the desert horizon. The next day, they presented their evidence to the leaders of Project Horizon. At first, skepticism reigned. Some dismissed their claims as wild speculation, while others accused them of tampering with the data. But when Alan played footage of the rogue simulation, including the appearance of Sophia Lane, the room fell silent. After hours of heated debate, a consensus emerged. Humanity would keep the simulator active, but strict regulations would govern its use. A global council was formed to oversee operations, ensuring that interactions with alternate realities remained ethical and controlled. Though relieved, Alan and Clara knew the battle wasn't over. The simulator was a tool of unimaginable power, and with power came responsibility. As they watched the machine power up once again, its screen flickering to life with images of countless worlds waiting to be explored, they couldn't help but wonder. Had they done enough to protect the fragile balance between realities? Or had they merely delayed the inevitable? The days following the Global Council's decision were a whirlwind of activity. News of the Class 13 simulator's true capabilities spread quickly, sparking debates across every corner of the world. Some hailed it as humanity's greatest achievement, while others condemned it as reckless meddling with forces beyond comprehension. For Alan and Clara, the pressure was relentless. They found themselves at the center of a storm, answering questions from journalists, politicians, and scientists alike. Despite the chaos, they remained focused on one goal: ensuring the simulator was used responsibly. The newly formed Oversight Council implemented strict guidelines. Users were required to undergo rigorous training before accessing the machine, and all simulations were monitored in real time by a team of experts. Even so, doubts lingered. Could humanity truly be trusted to wield such power? Or would curiosity and ambition inevitably lead to disaster? One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Alan and Clara sat together in the lab. The simulator stood silent in the corner, its sleek surface reflecting the dim glow of overhead lights. Clara stared at it, her expression troubled. "Do you think we made the right choice?" she asked quietly. Alan sighed, leaning back in his chair. "I don't know," he admitted, "but shutting it down wasn't an option either. If we had, someone else would have tried to replicate it, without any safeguards." Clara nodded, though her unease didn't fade. What if Sophia was wrong? What if the bridge collapses no matter what we do? Before Alan could respond, the simulator hummed to life unexpectedly. Its screen flickered, displaying a series of images that seemed to pulse with energy. Faces, landscapes, and fragments of conversations flashed by too quickly to comprehend. Then, without warning, the machine stabilized, revealing a single scenario. A bustling marketplace in a city unlike any they had ever seen. "What's happening?" Clara whispered, rising from her seat. "I don't know," Alan replied, his voice tense. "It shouldn't be doing this on its own." As they watched, the simulation began to shift. The marketplace dissolved into a dense forest, then morphed, again into a barren desert under a blood-red sky. Each transition was seamless yet unnervingly erratic. It was as though the simulator was searching for something, or someone. Then suddenly the changes stopped. The screen displayed a quiet village nestled in the shadow of towering mountains. In the center of the village stood a man, his face obscured by a hood. He turned slowly, as if sensing their presence, and raised a hand in greeting. Alan exchanged a glance with Clara. "Is this another test?" he asked. "I don't think so," she replied. "This feels different." Without hesitation, they activated the neural interface headsets and entered the simulation. The moment they stepped into the virtual world, they felt an overwhelming sense of familiarity. The air smelled of pine and earth, and the distant sound of running water echoed through the valley. Everything about the scene felt vivid and alive. The hooded figure approached them, lowering his hood to reveal a weathered face marked by years of hardship. His eyes, however, held a spark of determination. "You've come," he said simply. "Who are you?" Alan asked, his tone cautious. "My name is Jonas," the man replied. "I am from a reality much like yours, but not entirely. Our worlds share a connection, one forged by your machine." Clara frowned. "Why did you bring us here?" Jonas hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "Your simulator has done more than bridge realities. It has awakened something ancient, a force that exists between dimensions. This force feeds on instability, growing stronger with each ripple your machine creates." Alan felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of force?" Jonas shook his head. "We don't fully understand it, but we know this. If left unchecked, it will consume both our worlds and countless others." Clara stepped forward, her voice firm. "How do we stop it?" "There may be a way," Jonas said. "In my world, there is a device, an artifact, capable of sealing dimensional rifts. If you can retrieve it, you might be able to stabilize the bridge before it's too late." "Where is this artifact?" Alan asked. "In the ruins of an ancient city buried deep within these mountains," Jonas replied. "But beware, the journey will not be easy. The force I spoke of guards the artifact fiercely, twisting reality to protect itself." For a moment, neither Alan nor Clara spoke. The weight of Jonas's words settled over them like a heavy blanket. They had already risked so much by entering the simulator. Now they were being asked to venture even deeper into unknown territory. "We'll do it," Clara said finally, her resolve unwavering. Alan looked at her, surprised. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "If there's even a chance to fix this, we have to take it." Jonas offered them a small map etched onto a piece of parchment. "Follow this path," he instructed, "and trust no one, not even yourselves. The force will try to deceive you." With that, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the forest. Alan and Clara exchanged a glance, then set off toward the mountains. The journey was grueling. The terrain grew increasingly treacherous, with jagged cliffs and narrow paths that tested their endurance. Along the way, they encountered strange phenomena, shifting landscapes, whispers in languages they didn't recognize, and fleeting glimpses of figures watching them from afar. Each step felt like a battle against both the environment and their own minds. At last, they reached the entrance to the ancient city. Its crumbling walls loomed above them, covered in vines and moss. The air inside was thick with dust, and the faint scent of decay lingered in every corridor. They followed the map carefully, navigating through labyrinthine halls until they arrived at a massive chamber. In the center of the room stood the artifact, a crystalline orb resting on a pedestal. Its surface shimmered with an otherworldly light, casting colorful reflections across the walls. As they approached, the ground trembled, and a low growl echoed through the chamber. From the shadows emerged a creature unlike anything they had ever seen. Its form constantly shifted, taking on shapes that defied logic. One moment it was a towering beast with glowing eyes. The next, it dissolved into a swirling mass of tendrils and smoke. It moved toward them, radiating malice. "This is it," Alan said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. "We need to grab the artifact and get out of here." Clara nodded, gripping a makeshift weapon they had scavenged during their journey. Together they charged forward, dodging the creature's attacks as they made their way to the pedestal. Just as Alan reached for the orb, the creature lunged, knocking him to the ground. "Alan!" Clara shouted, swinging her weapon with all her strength. The blow connected, forcing the creature to retreat momentarily. Seizing the opportunity, Alan grabbed the artifact and tucked it under his arm. "We need to go," he yelled, scrambling to his feet. They ran as fast as they could, retracing their steps through the ruins. Behind them, the creature roared in fury, its form dissolving into nothingness as the artifact's power began to seal the rift. By the time they reached the edge of the city, the landscape around them was already changing, stabilizing into something solid and real. When they returned to the lab, exhausted but triumphant, they placed the artifact near the simulator. Its light pulsed gently, syncing with the machine's core systems. Slowly, the erratic fluctuations ceased, and the simulator settled into a steady hum. For the first time in weeks, Alan and Clara allowed themselves to breathe. They had done it. They had restored balance to the bridge between worlds. But as they gazed at the simulator, now calm and silent, they couldn't shake the feeling that their work was far from over. The days that followed felt like a fragile calm after a storm. The artifact had stabilized the Class 13 simulator, and for the first time in weeks, there were no reports of strange glitches or unintended side effects. Users who entered the simulations described them as immersive but grounded, no longer blurring the lines between reality and fabrication. It seemed as though the bridge between worlds had been repaired, or at least contained. But Alan and Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. They spent hours monitoring the simulator's activity, watching its energy levels and data streams with meticulous care. While everything appeared normal on the surface, subtle anomalies continued to appear. The artifact's light would occasionally flicker, and faint echoes of unfamiliar voices could be heard if one listened closely enough. These signs were small, almost imperceptible, but they gnawed at the edges of their minds. One evening, as the lab grew quiet and the rest of the staff left for the day, Clara sat alone at her workstation, staring at the simulator. She replayed footage from their journey to retrieve the artifact, pausing on a frame where Jonas stood in the village. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried a weight that made her uneasy. What had he meant when he warned them to trust no one? Not even themselves, still working? Alan's voice broke the silence as he entered the room. Clara turned to him, her brow furrowed. "I can't stop thinking about what Jonas said," she admitted. "About the force feeding on instability. Do you think it's really gone?" Alan sighed, pulling up a chair beside her. "I don't know," he said honestly. "The artifact seems to have sealed the rift, but I feel it too. Like we're missing something." Before they could delve deeper into the conversation, the simulator hummed softly, drawing their attention. Its screen flickered, displaying a series of images that shifted rapidly. Faces, landscapes, fragments of conversations. Then just as suddenly as it began, the screen stabilized, showing a single figure standing in a dimly lit room. It was Sophia Lane, the woman they had met in the idyllic, alternate reality. "Sophia?" Clara whispered, rising from her seat. The figure nodded, her expression serious. "You've done well to restore balance," she said, her voice steady. "But the force Jonas spoke of is not entirely gone. It has retreated, yes, but it waits. And it grows stronger with every interaction between our worlds." Alan stepped closer, his tone urgent. "What do you mean? We thought the artifact fixed everything." "It did, for now," Sophia replied. "But the bridge remains delicate. Each use of the simulator weakens it further, creating new ripples that the force can exploit. If humanity continues to push its limits, the bridge will collapse again. And this time it may take both our worlds with it." Clara felt a knot tighten in her stomach. "Then what are we supposed to do? Shut it down completely? Sophia hesitated before answering. That decision rests with your people, but know this. The artifact cannot hold forever. Eventually, it will need to be replaced, or the bridge will fail regardless. Alan exchanged a glance with Clara, his frustration evident. So we're back to square one, he muttered. No matter what we do, there's always a catch. Sophia's gaze softened. This is the burden of creation, she said gently. To build wonders is to invite responsibility. Your kind has always sought knowledge, but wisdom comes from understanding the cost of that pursuit. Her words lingered in the air as the simulation faded, leaving the screen blank once more. Alan and Clara stood in silence, the weight of her message pressing down on them. They had come so far, risked so much, and yet the future remained uncertain. Over the next few weeks, they worked tirelessly to share Sophia's warning with the Global Council. At first, many dismissed her words as overly cautious, arguing that the simulator's benefits outweighed the risks. But as Alan and Clara presented their findings, data showing the lingering anomalies, recordings of Sophia's message, and accounts of their encounter with Jonas, the council began to reconsider. Finally, after days of heated debate, a compromise was reached. The simulator would remain operational, but its use would be severely restricted. Only trained researchers and diplomats were permitted access, and even then, only under strict supervision. A new team was formed to monitor the artifact's condition and develop contingency plans in case it failed. Despite these measures, Alan and Clara knew the solution was temporary. Humanity's hunger for exploration and discovery would never truly be satisfied. Sooner or later, someone would push the boundaries too far, reopening the rift and unleashing the force once more. One night, as they prepared to leave the lab, Clara paused by the simulator. Its sleek surface reflected the soft glow of the overhead, lights reminding her of how far they had come, and how much farther they still had to go. What happens when the artifact gives out? She asked quietly, glancing at Alan. He shrugged, his expression grim. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, he said. For now, all we can do is keep moving forward. Clara nodded, though her unease didn't fade. Together, they locked up the lab and stepped outside, where the desert stretched endlessly under a star-filled sky. The vastness of the universe reminded them of how small they were and how immense the challenges ahead would be. As they walked toward their car, neither spoke. There was nothing left to say. They had built a machine capable of bridging worlds, but in doing so, they had opened a door to forces they barely understood. Whether humanity would rise to meet the responsibility of such power or succumb to its dangers remained to be seen. Back inside the lab, the simulator hummed softly, its screen flickering briefly before going dark. Somewhere deep within its core, the artifact pulsed with a faint light, holding the fragile balance between realities together, for now.